This is Legal Fiction, the podcast where we interrogate the stories the law tells and the ones it hides. The podcast that dives deep into the legal contradictions shaping American life. I'm Alexandra Reed. Today's question: what is the Smithsonian Institution, legally? To most of us, it's a collection of national museums, educational, cultural, open to the public. But behind the public face lies a deeper legal identity, one that changes depending on who's asking the question. In court, the Smithsonian has claimed to be a federal agency, immune from First Amendment challenges. In public, it presents itself as a public trust, accountable to the American people. So, which is it? Joining me today is Julian Raven, British-American artist and the plaintiff in Raven v. Sajet, a First Amendment lawsuit that's now pending potential review before the United States Supreme Court. Julian, welcome to Legal Fiction.
Thank you, Alexandra. It's an honor to be here and to finally have this conversation in the open.
Let's go back to the origin. Your lawsuit started with a rejected painting, a patriotic portrait of Donald Trump, which you submitted to the National Portrait Gallery. But things escalated. Walk us through what happened.
Sure. At first, it seemed like a simple curatorial decision. I submitted a piece titled "Unafraid and Unashamed," a large, expressive portrait of then-candidate Donald Trump. The response was dismissive, which I expected, but what followed was far from ordinary. When I began asking why the rejection occurred, I encountered not just silence, but legal resistance. So, I filed a First Amendment lawsuit, believing I had the right to challenge an institution that claimed to serve the public. That's when the Smithsonian revealed its legal fallback. It argued in court that it was not accountable as a public institution, but as a federal agency protected by government speech doctrine.
That legal pivot caught a lot of people off guard. Were you surprised by it?
Stunned. Like most people, I assumed the Smithsonian, funded by Congress and advertised as America's attic, was answerable to the people it serves. But the moment they were challenged, they used a completely different identity in court, a legal shell that shielded them from responsibility. It felt like the rules changed as soon as the public asked hard questions.
And yet, when President Trump publicly referenced your lawsuit while explaining his desire to remove Kim Sajet, the media barely mentioned your case. That had to be frustrating.
Very. You would think that when a sitting president cites a constitutional lawsuit as part of a high-profile personnel decision at a national museum, journalists would dig in. But instead, the press focused solely on the optics. They missed or ignored the deeper legal issue entirely. Only one reporter even contacted me. The rest stuck to press releases and talking points.
Why do you think your case was so underreported?
Because the media, particularly legacy outlets, often default to institutional loyalty. The Smithsonian has this untouchable reputation. It's draped in Americana, history, and neutrality. Challenging it feels taboo. Add to that the political tension of Trump-era controversy, and journalists just backed off. It's easier to report on drama than to examine legal contradictions.
Do you think the media had a duty to ask tougher questions?
Absolutely. Journalism isn't just about relaying headlines. It's about holding power to account, and cultural institutions are power. When the Smithsonian says one thing in court and another in public, that's newsworthy. That's not a niche art dispute, that's a constitutional dilemma.
You've said that journalists didn't even read the court filings. How do you know that?
Because if they had, they would have seen what I saw, that the Smithsonian's courtroom identity was incompatible with its public face. It wasn't hidden, it was right there in the legal record. But instead of investigating, the media quoted each other in circles, one outlet referenced the next, and no one went to the source.
Let's get into that contradiction. Public trust versus federal agency. What's the legal difference?
It's enormous. A public trust is supposed to serve the public. It's funded by taxpayer dollars, guided by transparency, and bound by constitutional principles. It can't discriminate based on viewpoint, and it must uphold free expression. A federal agency, by contrast, is an extension of the government. It can engage in government speech, which legally allows it to promote one message and suppress others, as long as it's acting in an official capacity.
And the Smithsonian claimed both.
Yes, to the public they say, we're open to all, we're a place of learning and democratic access. But when someone challenges that access, they switch gears. We're the government, your rights don't apply here. That legal two-face is deeply problematic.
Do donors understand this distinction?
I doubt it. If you give money to a museum that calls itself a public trust, you assume it operates under constitutional values. You believe your donation supports open dialogue, artistic freedom, civic engagement. But if the institution turns around and uses government speech doctrine to suppress dissent, that's not what donors signed up for.
Why hasn't Congress stepped in to clarify this?
There's a lack of awareness. Most members of Congress don't know the Smithsonian uses this legal ambiguity to avoid accountability. There's also a political fear. No one wants to be seen as attacking a beloved national institution. But asking for clarity is not an attack, it's responsible governance.
And how have the courts responded?
So far, they've accepted the Smithsonian's arguments without seriously questioning them. That's why we're now seeking Supreme Court review to force the question that's been dodged for too long. What is the Smithsonian really?
Do you think the Supreme Court will take your case?
It's always uncertain, but the constitutional stakes are high. If the court wants to protect the integrity of the First Amendment, this is the kind of case that demands their attention.
Let's talk about the First Amendment. What exactly is being threatened here?
It's the principle of viewpoint neutrality. If a publicly funded institution can declare itself immune to free speech claims, then we're entering a world where your rights depend on semantics. If the Smithsonian can silence one viewpoint because it's unpopular or political, what stops other institutions from doing the same?
Are you worried this sets a national precedent?
Yes, if this legal contradiction stands, it becomes a model for others. Museums, universities, even non-profits with federal ties all could claim dual identities to sidestep constitutional obligations. That's not just bad policy, it's the erosion of civic trust.
Some would argue that curatorial decisions aren't censorship, that institutions have the right to select what they showcase. How do you respond?
I agree to a point. But when an institution is federally funded and holds itself out as a public trust, its curatorial decisions can't be arbitrary or ideologically driven. Once public funds are involved, the Constitution enters the room.
What would a fair system look like?
Clarity. Either the Smithsonian is a federal agency and it must say so transparently, or it's a public trust bound by constitutional norms. The ambiguity must end. You can't wear two legal hats and expect public confidence.
If you had a chance to speak directly to the leaders of the Smithsonian, what would you say?
I'd say you have a responsibility to be honest about what you are. The American people deserve clarity, artists deserve fairness, donors deserve transparency. You can't claim to represent the people and then silence them when it's inconvenient.
And to the Supreme Court?
I would say, this is your moment to defend the First Amendment. Don't let legal maneuvering erase constitutional obligations. Draw the line. define the boundaries, make it clear that even our most beloved institutions must answer to the law.
Julian Raven, thank you for joining us and for your courage in pursuing a very complex and controversial fight.
Thank you, Alexandra. I appreciate the thoughtful questions and the space to be heard.
You've been listening to Legal Fiction, the podcast that goes beyond the headlines to examine the constitutional contradictions shaping American life. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow us on your podcast app and share the show. Help us shine a light on the legal stories hiding in plain sight. Until next time, remember, if the story sounds too clean, you might be hearing a legal fiction.